Honor to have Dr. Tariq Ramadan, Professor Tariq Ramadan here today. He is Professor of Contemporary Islamic Studies at the Oxford University Oriental Institute, St Anthony's College, and also teaches at the Oxford Faculty of Theology. He is visiting professor at the Faculty of Islamic Studies in Qatar and the University of Malaysia, Perlis, Senior Research Fellow at Doshisha University in Kyoto, Japan, and Director of the Research Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics in Doha, Qatar. He holds an MA in Philosophy and French Literature and a PhD in Arabic and Islamic Studies from the University of Geneva. In Cairo, Egypt, he received one-to-one intensive training in classical Islamic scholarship from Al-Azhar University scholars, and he has ijazat in 7 disciplines, mashallah. Through his writings and lectures, Professor Tariq has contributed to the debate on the issues of Muslims in the West and the Islamic revival in the Muslim world. He is active at academic and grassroots level, lecturing extensively throughout the world on theology, ethics, social justice, ecology and interfaith, as well as intercultural dialogue. He is president of the European think tank European Muslim Network in Brussels. So please welcome Professor Tariq Ramadan to the stage. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ما يهدي الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أيتها الأخوات أيها الإخوة أحييكم بتحية الإسلام تحية من عند الله مباركة طيبة السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you so much for your invitation today here at the Deen Institute. It was not so easy to organize my presence, but thank you for having organized this and bringing to the fore such a difficult question. And I think that what I heard right now, what I know from Dr. Ingrid Madsen's discourse and perception and understanding of the issue, I think that what is important also is not only to get an understanding of some of the problems or to get a better understanding of the past, but also to go towards our responsibility to change things and to move on. And this will be the second part of my talk is or how can we be involved into a movement that is a movement of thought that could help us to evolve, to reform our way of dealing with the scriptural sources, with some even of the questions that we have. Because it might be through what you are saying, for example, that we have to question the questions the way we are putting them. So I will come to this in my discussion. So let me start by saying, is there a problem? And once again, you know, very often we have this perception from outside. The people, when they look at Muslims, they have the perception that, or even the discourses or the perceptions that we have from within, this is something which is coming from abroad. The question of women is, and especially because we live in the West, is brought to us through some cultural and social pressures. On the other side, when you are within the community, you can see that many, and this is why we are here today, is that there are questions coming from within. So are there problems? Yes. Now, it's a wide range of problems, and we have to be quite clear in the way we are dealing with them. From even, for example, you know, just the way I started today, starting with women. أيتها الأخوات أيها الإخوة. And you had someone once, I said this in an Arabic country, coming to me and say, why do you start with women? In Arabic, we start with men. In Arabic, meaning the language and the culture, we start by أيها الإخوة, أيتها. If you say أيتها الأخوات, sometimes you don't even say that. And I did it on purpose, because I think that this is the starting point. The discourse, the perception, the very deep starting point is there. And then you have all the problems that we have, some social, religious status, social status, and leadership. These are problems that are very wide, and we have to be structured in the way we are dealing with them. And we have to circumscribe the problems, multidimensional and multi-layer at the same time. If we try to get an understanding from this, is that listening to what you said, there is the first problem is our relationship with the texts, the scriptural sources. This is a very difficult problem. It's not as easy as that. I think that with this, by quoting, this is not what you did, because adding to what you said, you added the fact that we had also questions to put, but coming back to the past and saying we had scholars and women, that's all fine. The problem is the way all this has been structured in history. So why is it that now we are quoting the past, not being able to deal with the present in the way we deal with the scriptural sources? There is something here which is a problem. We have to deal with that. It's not easy. So our relationship with the scriptural sources, the texts, is something that we need to assess. Our relationship with culture. And it's something which is, it's not simple to say, we had a problem is that in the book Radical Reform, I was speaking about the fact that we have a cultural projection in the way some of the scholars are dealing, and it's quite clear with all the scholars, by the way. All the great scholars that were mentioned here were influenced by culture. All of them. You know why? Because it's just normal. It's that you are a human being, you read the texts from the culture, or within the culture, or through the lenses of the culture that you are dealing with. That's normal. So this is where the cultural dimension, it's important, and you have to take this into account. Not to dismiss the readings of the past, but to take this into account by saying, yes, there is something that we have to deal with, and to know how to have to deal with this, and understanding also that if we trust the divine project, Allah's will, God's will, if we trust Him, we understand that by us going through all the cultures, He's expecting us to come back with al-bayan, nurtured by cultures in the name of the universality of the text. Cultures are not here by accident. Cultures are necessary for us to discover, to come back to al-bayan, which is bringing to the light the deep meaning of the trans-historical text. So cultures are essential. This diversity is God's will. If Allah had willed, وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ Ummatan meant also not only one community, but it could be one culture, because at the moment you have cultures, you have interpretations. So He wanted this diversity, meaning you deal with my oneness, at-tawheed, with your diversity. No way for you to deal with me if you don't deal with the diversity of cultures within time and space. So this is very deep, in fact. It's really something that we have to deal with as Muslims. The third dimension is also something that we are not talking about. Here, not enough. It's the psychological factor. We are facing, when we speak about, from where psychology comes, from the very essence of us being human beings. But it's deeper than that. The relationship that we have with other cultures, other civilizations, is shaping a psychology that you have to take into account. Out of confidence, the way you read is different than out of fear. So this relationship with yourself and the other is essential here. And if you look at the Muslim communities around the world, you can get it right. There is a psychological factor in the way we read the text, in the way we come back to the source. Sometimes we come back to the tradition to protect ourselves from the current questions. So it's a very protective way. And this is also something that we can see in some Salafi literalist trends, that the way they quote the text is the best protection from your questions. Get that? No. There is something that I'm asking. I have a special fatwa, no clapping. And no Allahu Akbar as well. Allahu Akbar with your heart, and I was asked to remind you is this, which is you say Allahu Akbar in your heart, and all what you can do in silence is have some dua for all the oppressed people around the world. Oppressed people means what happened yesterday in Egypt, what is happening in Palestine, and what is happening within families, where women are treated in a way which is just unacceptable. When you have a woman who is facing domestic violence in the name of Islam, you better pray for her instead of clapping and saying Allahu Akbar. Get that? I hope so. Laughing is possible. You can go ahead with that. So the psychological factor is important here. And I think that this is also something that we have to deal with as an essential element. And as I said, the relationship with the others. Let me try, in 35 minutes with such a complex issue, but I think that you heard lots of important things today. Let me start with the first dimension, which is our relationship with the scriptural sources. The first thing which is important that we have to ask is, what is your objective when you read the text? What is your objective? When you come back to the Quran, this is a very essential question, by the way. And we know this when you are teaching literature, you have to come with this first question. And you have to come with it from an Islamic viewpoint is, what are you trying to do? And in the verses that you mentioned, which is essential, Ar-Rahman, Allah didn't speak about himself as Allah allama al-Quran, Ar-Rahman, out of mercy, out of my openness towards you. This is a gift for you. Allama al-Quran. So he taught the Quran. And then it's only after that خلق الإنسان, and then علمه البيان. علمه البيان, in the way you put it, which is also said by many other mufassirin, is something which is بيان القرآن وبيان إلى الناس. So it's two-way. What you extract from the Quran and the way you are going to express what? Meaning. You extract from the Quran meanings. And meanings means here something which is essential in any way. When you read, you need three things to get the meaning: is to understand what is said, is to get the semantic, and to understand the grammar, which in fact is exactly the same way that you have to do with cultures. In cultures, you need to get the semantic of the values, the grammar, the way it's organized, and the way this is expressed for the people. So anyway, when you deal with the text and when you deal with the context, you read the semantic, the grammar, and the meaning of the structure. And this is where, in Islam, what we have to understand here is, what are you trying to get out of the text? And this is where the most important thing is this relationship. I put this as something which is important. Why? Because I have a problem with some of my progressive, quote unquote, brothers and sisters. I have a problem. Why? Because very often, some of them, they come back to the quote-unquote Western sciences, so I'm very cautious, okay? And they take from the means, and they deal with the Quran in a way which is, let me take the means in the West and to challenge the understanding of the text through the means which is, for example, rationalism or historical critical sciences and things like this. Be careful with this. We have to use the means, but not at the price of the essence. Allah is telling us, God is telling us, عَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ عَلَّمَهُ الْبَيَانَ. There is something which has to do with your heart, it has to do with your mind. Be careful. Rational means will never get the light of the text alone. Never. So there is a trust here, which is the other way, the other name of faith. Faith, الأمان, الإيمان هو الأمان, space of trust. What at the end, something which is, there is no neutral science. Anyone who is telling you, you know what, this is scientific, be careful with someone telling you it's scientific beyond ideology. Behind all the sciences, there are background. Our background as Muslims is, this is the very word of God, Kalamullah. And Allah said in the Quran that He sent the Quran before creating human beings, meaning the creation, and all the discussion that we had with the Mu'tazila was not about the fact it was at the beginning the word of God. They all agreed at the beginning, but was it created or not? It's another discussion. So here, what I'm saying is, in the way we read the Quran, in the way we understand why are we trying to read the Quran, and the way we read the Quran is to extract from the Quran the light that He put for us to get through our minds and through our hearts for our life. It's what we're trying to do. So some of our scholars, with a reduced understanding of how I read the Quran, they want to extract rules. Some others, they read the Quran to extract roles. I put you in this whole picture. And others, they want structure. While the Quran was revealed in 23 years in a specific culture with a movement. And the movement is the teaching. The movement is telling you where to go. So don't take one step as the final step if there are steps after this step. It's a movement. So the way we read the sources is something which is essential here in the way we have to understand. And this is why we can't only take the means that we can find in linguistic and things like this. This is something, because the very essence is, be careful, we deal with God's words in history. And this is where we have to be very cautious about not extracting, forgetting this divine, spiritual dimension. So I would say to any of you who wants to struggle for women's rights, never forget to make your ablution before reading the Quran. Do you understand what I mean here? Don't forget to make your ablution. This dimension of purification with Him to get the deep substance of the Quran is something that men and women should share. It's not with our minds that we are liberating our sisters. It's with our mind, our heart, and our understanding of Allamahul Bayan. Extract the very meaning of it. I'm saying this because what I see now with this progressive is all about rational structure, means, constructivism. Say, oh, be careful. And telling you this is science, as if there is no ideology. So the most powerful ideology is the one making you think that there is no ideology. This is very powerful. And you know what it is? Science. Telling you this is scientific. Take it as it is. So we have to be very cautious with this, which is the first dimension. I don't want to take too much time with this, but I wanted to start with this because I think that we need to get to this. And about the discussion about women, for example, when it comes to, are we talking about human beings and women as human beings, as I kept on have been repeating this for the last 25 years, we have a problem in the whole Islamic discourse in our tradition, because the majority of what we have been producing as Muslims and as the Muslim scholars have been doing is very often about the roles and not about being. And to be a woman, womanhood is a missing discourse in the Islamic tradition. So when it comes to the text is then something which has to be done, and you refer to this in our way we deal with the tradition, is what are the texts that we are referring to? Because some of the texts, and you will see something, it's very often the case, when it comes to women, it's very few Quranic texts and lots of ahadith that are referred to. Some of them we know now that are not even authentic. Some are disputed, and others are taken out of context and reduced to a very specific understanding. So on this, we need to have a very, very important work to do, still to do, in the way the relationship, first, the understanding of the Quran, but the Quran by the Quran, which means the very understanding of this evolution. Why is it important? Because we all accepted something which is important. This is an eternal, universal message, isn't it? The Quran for us is eternal. But there is something which is clear for us, is that it was revealed to a specific, or within a specific culture. The point is for us not to take the culture as the reference, because it's not the reference. What is going to be for us the reference is the movement from where the people were taken to where the people had to go. So the movement, it's important. And we read the steps, we read the rules in the light of the movement. And the movement is the divine pedagogy. So why then Allah would have sent the Prophet, ﷺ, 23 years with a mission, which is what? Change their mind, change their understanding, educate them, help them to read it in a better way. Why? Because there is an important factor. The first who we are taking Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu as a reference. He was the first in Medina not to be happy with the evolution of women. They answered back. And the Prophet ﷺ smiled at him, saying, you have to look at that and you have to deal with it. Because your culture of silencing women was a Meccan culture. Islam is telling you that the right to answer back, to tell you her thought, is Islamic. So principles beyond cultures. But you need to get that. You need to study this. And this is the understanding of the Quran by the Quran. And then the Quran with the hadith. And we all agree that the Quran is coming first. So all these discussions have been done by so many scholars. But now we need women to be involved in this. So I agree that we need muftis and we need women who are involved in but this understanding, the discourse in itself, the evolution of the discourse, the steps, and some of the important principles that we can get out of this is which principle can you extract from the revelation of the Quran over 23 years, not in a literalist way of dealing with the rules, but an understanding of dealing with the movement. The movement itself. Where are we heading? This is an important question when it comes to the selection of even the authenticity. I wrote a foreword for a book about, the wrong, the false hadith, and just showing how men were involved. Sometimes some of the men in history were producing a hadith just to protect their power, and we have to deal with that. The second thing is to get in our study the overall message of Islam. And the overall message of Islam is what you are saying about al-maqasid. We have to be clear on this. Yes, al-Quran, al-Sunnah, the hadith, the Prophet tradition, they came with, and we have objectives. Some of the scholars inductively came to the maqasid, which are the higher objectives. It's all a question of balancing. Getting the rules and knowing the objectives. It's knowing what we want to reach and what were the main objectives from the Quran. So this is also something that we have to deal with, is this balancing. The problem that we have now is that we have been so focused on the rules that the people who are coming with the objectives are neglecting the rules. So they are not. This is where we need to have something which is balancing. It's balancing the whole thing. And not to get the rules without the objectives. That's not going to work. But not to get the objectives by just forgetting that there are rules. And this is what I said at the beginning, it's important, the way you trust the fact that this is coming from God. That's an important question. That's an important question. So the way your relationship with the Quran is an important question. The third dimension is read by whom, and as it was said and repeated, I think that we need now women much more involved in scholarship, ulama, or, shaykhat, as we say. But we need women to be involved in this critical discussion. And once again, this perception that it's going to come, I heard this in the States, by the way, I'm saying be careful with this as well. So it's going to be through the converts. It's as if the converts have some means and understanding that, so I'm out of the picture, I'm sorry. I think it's completely silly. We need the converts' vision, yes. Because this is where some questions about the cultures of origin and the way we deal with the text. But we need all these eyes, all these readings together. So this is why we need to understand that the diversity is important coming from all the dimensions. It's important to get all that. So I would say that this is where we need to work together, and not as if there is a new authoritative voice in the West. And as I told you, be careful with anything which is, the current and the contemporary sciences are all, ideologically neutral. I think that this is a point which is important to discuss. Last point that I wanted to make about the text is we need to agree on something. Whatever is your take on the reform process and what we need and how we are going to deal with, the misogyny and all this, we need to accept something. And this is a challenge for every one of us. That at the end, willing it or not, we'll have many different answers for the same question. So we need to deal with diversity. So the people who are looking at, the Salafi or the literalists by saying, oh, you are backward, or you are Salafi, or you are, some Muslims even saying you are extremists. No, you have extremist views. But as long as you have an interpretation which is coming back to the sources, faithful to the principles, accepted in our tradition, you have no right to put the people within or without or outside Islam. So this accepted diversity works also for women. You can't just come and say this is the only right vision. And to say, to label yourself as progressive, and you need to be very careful, because even with our understanding in the diversity, there are levels, there are priorities, and there are things that are the essential, the foundations, and then we have secondary issues. Be careful with not being misled by taking as something which is a priority, a secondary issue, because this is the story of the time, or this is the controversy of our time. Be careful with this. So it means that you have to be in this quite equipped. So the point about text is, as you can see, very complex. And the starting point is a very deep discussion that we need to have. What are your means? How are you going? What are the methodology through which you are going to deal with the texts? This is a very deep one. It's not an easy one. And I think that the spiritual dimension, I'm very, very, I repeat this because I want you to understand that. I really, really think that we need to be quite clear on our relationship with the Quran as the very word of God, of Allah. And this spiritual dimension, this trust that you have that this is coming from Him, it's important. And you have the means, the intellectual means to extract from the Quran in the light of your context. This is trust in Him, trust in your capacity. So, but there is a text. And you cannot deny that there is a text. You can't deny that this is a text. It is not human construction. It's not. This is not coming from our construction. It's not a projection. This is coming from God. That's essential for us. And be careful, all the new trends that you have, questioning, is it coming from God? This is just ilham, and he translated this into his own words. All this discussion, this new discussion, changing even what was said by the Mu'tazila in rereading our Torah, is something that we need to question. So I still have 7 minutes, is it right? 5? Okay. Culture, it's another dimension. And I spoke about this, I wrote a lot about this, and once again, in many books, I came back to this, so I'm not going to take too much time on this, but we all know that in the cultures of origin, the great majority of the Muslim majority countries, patriarchy, it's important. And this is something which is also important. And once again here, we are in the discussion with feminists. And I don't agree with the people rejecting feminists. I'm not scared of using the concept of feminism if I define it. It's men and women in the name of Islam against discrimination. So it's men and women together in the name of Islam, in the name of the text, in the name of this substance. But this is where you are challenging a very specific understanding. But there is something in the Western currents that are important. When they are telling you, for example, constructivism, that it's all socially constructed. You as a Muslim, you can say no, because from Al-Quran Al-Karim, there is something which is essential, which is femininity and womanhood. There is something which is like this, which was created like this for us. But we cannot deny that in cultural terms, there is something which is socially constructed. Of course. We need to challenge this. We need to challenge, and this is why, in the name of Islam, we are not accepting any culture the way it is. Anyone, even the Western culture. In the name of my religion, in the name of this book, which is transhistorical, no culture is void of criticism. I'm going to challenge every single culture. Every single one telling me this is scientific, I'm going to challenge this because there is an ideology. And my understanding is, in the name of my relationship to him, I want to understand the methodology and the structure that you are using to read history, to read human beings. So anyone who's telling us, in the name of science, we are now not to teach what is, who is a woman or who is a man, is gender, everything is about gender. You have to challenge that. Even that you have to challenge. So this is where the cultural dimension is not only the patriarchal societies, which is important, we also have to, and the cultural projection, as I told you, all the scholars were culturally influenced by their environment, and this is important. So the projection here, it's important, and in the male environment, it's also something which is important. This is why I'm saying that in cultural terms, we need women to be involved in the discussion, because it's another perspective. I really think that allamahul bayan meant if we accept that there is something which is intrinsically different between men and women. There is something which is womanhood and manhood, it's different. It means what? It doesn't mean that we should accept discrimination, because as it was said, discrimination is not a Quranic projection or a divine project. No, it's respect and relationship. It means, in fact, allamahul bayan, that men and women are going also to extract from the Quran understandings and vision that could be different, that could be complementary. I really think that you don't have the same reading of the Quran if you are a man and a woman. I deeply think that your understanding of some dimensions in the Quran are going to be different. It could be different because of culture. It could be different from out of your understanding, sensitivity. So between what the neurosciences are telling us today and feminist trends are telling us, we are in between and we take from everyone, just to be able to question the tradition and to question the scriptural sources. Last point, as I said, when it comes to the West and the fear and the psychological dimension, when it comes to women, we have a double problem. We have a double problem because out of fear and lack of confidence, we don't dare questioning too much and too far. And I would expect, or I would suggest that what we need is to push the questions and to say all the questions are legitimate. So let us question the Torah, the Islamic tradition. Let us come back to what was done by so many scholars before us, because there is something also which is a problem, is that we talk about the classical tradition, but we don't study the classical tradition. Many of us, we don't even know what was said by some great scholars about very specific issues. And in some areas, they were even more advanced than us in the way they were confident with the way they were dealing with the sources, not in all. And sometimes they were influenced by their culture. So we have to push this critical thinking. We need critical thinking to get confidence with, so to go beyond this fear. But there is another problem which is important with your presence in the West. It's important because you are getting knowledge and more means, and that's fine. If and only if you don't forget the first question that I was putting as to your relationship to the Quran. Okay, it's not a rational one only. But there is another thing which is important, is the way we are influenced by the way religions were taught in the West. For example, something which is alien to the Islamic tradition is the sense of guilt. We don't start with the sense of guilt. We start with the sense of responsibility in Islam. And what we are doing now is nurturing this sense of guilt, which is not essentially. So we are transforming, after having said for centuries, Islam is not exactly a religion, we are transforming Islam into a religion that is close to Christianity in the way we deal with the sense of guilt. And we are going very far on this. All our positions, for example, in very, very specific things, contraception and abortion when it comes to women, the way we deal with this is much more influenced by our context and the general discussion than about the Islamic understanding of that. Much more influence. So we are scared, so we think the tougher I am, the more Islamic it will be. I'm sorry. That's a completely distorted mindset. That's not the way we deal with the scriptural sources. So this is why we need to get to something which is the discussion on this is the double influence. It's the fear between the two, influenced by some, the sense of guilt. It's what I was saying also, this way of dealing. And the last point, which also is this sense that in religion, haram comes first. Especially when it comes to women. This is a mindset. This is fear. Someone who starts always with haram is just revealing a state which is fear before confidence. In Islam is al-ibaha, al-asliya, permission. Go ahead. Deal with your nature. Deal with your mind. Deal with your heart. Deal with the world. And then go know the limits. But don't put the limits if you don't have the light. Don't tell me it's haram before giving me the bayan. So don't translate the Quran or implement the Quran is the way. Allama al-Quran meant allama al-hudud. Limitations and prohibitions and punishments. I think that this is wrong. And so now with all this, and you can see culture, psychology, and the first was text, what we should do, and I will end with this, is it's a two-way process. We need to do two things. First, to be involved, as I said, with reading the text, the scriptural sources, and the tradition. And we have to be serious about that. Some are doing it, and I think that we need internal discussion and accepting this diversity within. It's important. This is something which is important, starting with a discourse talking about women as women and not from another perspective. It's not the roles, it's tell me what you want to get from the Quran, is what and how we deal with women and men. The second thing that I would like to say when it comes to misogyny is, you know, by the way, it would have been one whole lecture about the concept of misogyny that we can get, because it's a complex concept. It's complex misogyny. It's not as simple as that. It's not just, you know, anyway, that I don't have time for that. But it's a complex one. In psychological terms, if you come back to the psychological tradition and the deep understanding of how do you translate this in action, how this is expressed, and what are the sources, it's quite complex. But I wanted to say here that there is a second thing that we have to do, and I'm happy to have men and women here, is that all this discussion will never be successful if we are not involving in the whole discussion the question of men in the picture. I keep on repeating this. There will be no real solutions for the future if you don't speak about men. Manhood, it's the roles of men within the society and within the family. This is deep, because the very deep psychological crisis is also with men today. It's deep, it's very deep. And not only in Muslim majority countries, here, in many ways. Talk to the teachers, talk to the professors, talk to the psychologists, talk to the sociologists, and you can see there is something which is deep in this change when it comes to man's identity. And if you have this, it's very difficult. So this is where, coming back to the source, we also have to deal with that. And the two-way process is this. Inductively, there are fields where we have to work, and I just want to mention them. And this is where you, at the grassroots level, as students, as activists, as scholars, we should be involved by questioning from an inductive process and coming from the sources and coming together. This is, by the way, exactly, you were mentioning the Center on Islamic Legislation and Ethics. What we are trying to do is to come with the people inductively from the grassroots level, dealing with the reality and scholars, and put them together and say, now you have to talk. Now you have to come with something which is questioned by the reality and questioned as to you dealing with the texts. And what I would say is the discourse is one field, is which time of discourse on women we have now, and I mentioned some of them. Family. You know that I myself was surprised by some of the young Muslims that I have been dealing with for 20 years, telling you today in the West, you know what? We might have to change our understanding of what is a family. So what do you mean? So it's not only men and women, it could be much more complex than that. I say, what do you mean? Many things. But the point is for us that the concept of family, the way we deal with family, the crisis within, the relationship within, the roles, the dynamic, education within the family, tarbiyah, all these dimensions have to go beyond the roles of men and women. I think it's important in the way we deal with family. Education, where women should be much more involved in all these dimensions, and men together. Men, today we have to reconcile men with education. Mosques also. Mosques, and not only to know if we can lead the prayer or not, which is a question that was sometimes dealt with in a very simplistic way, not coming back to the deep tradition here, but I would say that our mosques, these places, we have to rethink, not only to say, okay, you know what, we have to have more women within the mosques or within the administration. It's deeper than that. It's the way you think about space of worship within the society. This is a deep question that we have. What do you mean by a mosque? How do you think of a mosque within the city? This is something that has to be discussed, not only about who is the leader, but how do we think of it within the community? These are questions that are important. Job markets, and I think that, once again, and leadership, that are questions that are coming from the grassroots. We have to question the text, and from the text to take this into account. So it's a two-way process, and no one in this room can say, I can't do anything. Because the very moment you have a question, this is the starting point of being involved in the movement. So the point here is not opposing men and women. We are struggling for exactly the same. Second, no victim mentality. No victim mentality, and I'm happy that in this conference today, it's just no victim mentality. At the end, we'll have what we deserve. And get it right. The verse of the Quran, in Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin, this verse is saying He's not going to change anything if you don't change yourselves, and this is where we have to be involved together in this. It means this in our daily life, and as I said, it's complex, the comprehensive dimension, the holistic dimension. Be careful with the West, where you live, giving you the means, and you don't question the substance. Anyone who is telling you the means are scientific, question the substance. There is always ideology in the means. Never forget your ablution before reading the Quran. Wallahu a'lam wa a'la wa ahkam. Wassalamu alaikum.